I'll never forget the moment Dominic Rossi, the most feared man in Lower East Side, fell to his knees because of a little girl and $20. The air in his opulent office, usually thick with the scent of expensive cigars and unspoken threats, suddenly became heavy with something else entirely. Raw, unfiltered grief. His men, hardened enforcers who had seen unspeakable acts of violence without flinching, stood frozen, their faces a mixture of shock and confusion. Dominic Rossi, the man whose name was whispered in hushed tones, the man who commanded respect and instilled terror with a single glance, was openly weeping. It wasn't a sob, not a wail, but a silent, profound breakdown that shook the very foundations of his formidable persona. His perfectly tailored Italian suit, usually a symbol of his power, seemed to sag under the weight of an invisible burden. The black rose tattoo on his neck, a mark of his dangerous allegiance, seemed to wilt, and the little girl, no older than 8, stood before him, her small hand still outstretched, holding 2 crumpled $10 bills. Her innocent brown eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and unwavering determination, held a power that no bullet or threat ever could. This wasn't a scene from a gangster movie. This was real life, unfolding in the heart of New York City, a moment that would forever alter the course of lives, proving that even in the darkest corners, a flicker of humanity could ignite the most unexpected transformation. The silence in that room was deafening, broken only by the soft, almost imperceptible sound of a powerful man's heart breaking and then, perhaps, beginning to heal. The date was November 8th, 1958. The setting, the bustling, vibrant, and sometimes brutal streets of New York City's Lower East Side. This was an era defined by its contrasts, the post-war boom bringing prosperity and optimism, yet beneath the surface, the intricate, often violent web of organized crime continued to thrive. The city was a symphony of sounds, the blare of yellow taxi horns, the distant rumble of the subway, the chatter of a dozen languages spilling from crowded tenements, and the ever-present hum of ambition and survival. Men in sharp suits and fedoras walked alongside women in elegant dresses and gloves, while children played stickball in the alleys, oblivious to the darker currents flowing beneath their feet. It was a time of classic cars, sleek Cadillacs, powerful Lincolns, and sturdy Chevrolets, gleaming under the streetlights, symbols of status and power. In this intricate tapestry of urban life, Dominic Rossi, at a formidable 35 years old, was a figure of undeniable authority. His dark hair, always impeccably slicked back, framed a face that was both handsome and menacing. His Italian suits, custom-made and always pristine, spoke of wealth and influence. But it was the subtle details that truly marked him. The intricate black rose tattoo blooming on the side of his neck, a silent testament to his affiliations, and the delicate yet ominous spiderweb tattooed across the back of his hands, hinting at the intricate traps he could weave. He was a man who commanded respect, not just through fear, but through a calculated intelligence that few could match. Into this world stepped Sofia Benedetti, a wisp of an 8-year-old girl, her large, expressive brown eyes holding a depth far beyond her years. She was the daughter of Marco Benedetti, a man whose life revolved around the warmth and tradition of his family's Italian restaurant. Sofia, often seen in a simple yet charming red dress typical of the era, possessed an innocence that seemed almost out of place in the gritty reality of the Lower East Side. Her connection to her father was absolute. He was her world, her protector, her anchor. But a shadow had begun to fall over their lives, a shadow cast by the very man who now dominated the neighborhood. Marco, a hard-working and honest man, had found himself entangled in a situation far beyond his control, a situation that had brought him into the dangerous orbit of Dominic Rossi. The conflict was clear. The innocent world of a little girl and her father was about to collide with the unforgiving power of the city's underworld, and the stakes were nothing less than everything they held dear. Before we continue, drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. The Ristorante Benedetti was more than just an eating establishment. It was a cornerstone of the Italian-American community in the Lower East Side. The air inside was perpetually thick with the intoxicating aromas of garlic, oregano, simmering tomato sauce, and freshly baked bread, a symphony of scents that promised comfort and tradition. Red and white checkered tablecloths adorned every table, and the walls were decorated with faded photographs of Italian landscapes and family patriarchs. The clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversations in Italian and English, and the occasional burst of laughter created a lively, welcoming atmosphere. In the background, a worn-out record player softly spun jazz tunes, the smooth saxophone melodies weaving through the bustling space, a perfect soundtrack to a 1958 evening. Outside, the street was a tableau of the era. Classic cars like a gleaming black Cadillac Eldorado, a stately Lincoln Continental, and a practical Chevrolet Bel Air were parked along the curb, their chrome glinting under the streetlights. Men in fedoras and trench coats hurried past, while women in cinched waist dresses and kitten heels strolled arm in arm. Sophia, small and agile, moved gracefully between the tables, helping her father clear plates and refill water glasses. Her red dress, a simple cotton frock with a modest collar, swished softly as she worked, her big brown eyes taking in everything around her. She loved the restaurant, the warmth, the familiar faces, the sense of belonging. But tonight, a different kind of energy permeated the room. A hush fell over the diners as the heavy oak door swung open, revealing Dominic Rossi. He wasn't alone. Two hulking figures, his most trusted enforcers, flanked him, their presence immediately chilling the vibrant atmosphere. Dominic himself was a vision of understated power. His charcoal gray Brioni suit, tailored to perfection, seemed to absorb the light, making him appear even more formidable. A crisp white shirt and a black silk tie completed his ensemble, and a gold Patek Philippe watch glinted subtly on his wrist. He moved with a predatory grace, his eyes scanning the room, missing nothing. The jazz music seemed to falter. The conversations died down to whispers. Sophia, clutching a stack of menus, felt a prickle of unease. She knew who he was. Everyone in the neighborhood did. Her father, Marco, a man usually brimming with jovial energy, visibly stiffened, his face paling slightly as Dominic's gaze settled on him. The tension in the Ristorante Benedetti became palpable, thick and heavy, like the rich sauce simmering on the stove. Why was Dominic Rossi here? The question hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone present. Dominic Rossi approached Marco Benedetti's table with a slow, deliberate pace, his men positioning themselves strategically near the entrance, their eyes sweeping the room. Marco, a man whose hands were usually dusted with flour or stained with tomato, wrung them nervously under the table. "Marco!" Dominic's voice was a low rumble, surprisingly calm, yet laced with an undeniable authority that sent shivers down Sophia's spine. "We need to talk." He gestured to the empty chair opposite Marco, and the restaurateur, without a word, pulled it out. Dominic settled into it, his movements precise, almost elegant despite the underlying menace. He lit a Cuban cigar, the rich, sweet scent momentarily cutting through the aroma of Italian food, and took a slow, contemplative puff. "It seems, Marco," he began, exhaling a plume of smoke, "that our last venture didn't quite pan out as planned." Marco swallowed hard, his gaze darting nervously toward Sophia, who was now pretending to wipe down a nearby table, her ears straining to catch every word. "Dominic, I swear I tried everything. The shipment was compromised, the docks were watched. It was out of my hands." Dominic's eyes, dark and unyielding, fixed on Marco. "Out of your hands, perhaps, but the debt, Marco, that remains firmly in yours." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, which somehow made it even more terrifying. $50,000, Marco, a considerable sum even in these times, and it's been outstanding for too long. $50,000. In 1958, that was a fortune, enough to buy several houses, enough to change a family's life forever. Sophia's small mind struggled to comprehend such a vast amount. She knew her father worked tirelessly, but $50,000 seemed like an insurmountable mountain. Dominic took another drag from his cigar. I'm a patient man, Marco, but even my patience has its limits. You have 48 hours. 48 hours to come up with my money. Or, he paused, letting the unspoken threat hang heavy in the air. There will be consequences. Consequences that neither you nor your family would wish to face. His gaze flickered almost imperceptibly towards Sophia, a brief, unsettling acknowledgement of her presence. Marco's face was ashen, his eyes wide with despair. He knew Dominic Rossi's reputation. Consequences were not just words. Sophia, though young, understood the gravity of the situation. The way her father's shoulders slumped, the fear in his eyes, it spoke volumes. Dominic, rising from the table, his Brioni suit uncreased, his black silk tie perfectly knotted, adjusted the gold watch on his wrist. He gave Marco one last, chilling look before turning and walking out, his men following silently. The jazz music slowly resumed, but the warmth had left the Ristorante Benedetti, replaced by a cold, suffocating fear. The moment Dominic Rossi's sleek Cadillac pulled away from the Ristorante Benedetti, Sophia knew she couldn't just stand by. Her father, usually a pillar of strength, looked utterly defeated, his face etched with a despair she had never seen before. The image of Dominic's cold eyes, the unspoken threat in his voice, replayed in her mind. She had to do something. Slipping out of the restaurant unnoticed, she watched as Dominic's car disappeared down the street. She knew she couldn't go to the police. Everyone knew that was a death sentence in their neighborhood when it came to men like Rossi. Her only hope was to appeal to the man himself. But how? She remembered hearing the older boys in the alley talking about where the boss conducted his business. She found little Tony, a scrawny kid a few years older than her, known for his uncanny ability to know everything happening on the streets. Tony, she whispered, pulling him aside, where does Mr. Rossi work? The man who just left my father's restaurant. Tony, intrigued by her urgency, pointed vaguely towards a grand building a few blocks away, near the docks. That big one, Sophia, the one with the fancy cars always parked outside. But you don't want to go there. Ignoring his warning, Sophia began her quest. She went home, her small heart pounding with a mixture of fear and resolve. She rummaged through her piggy bank, a ceramic pig with a chipped ear, and then through a small wooden box where she kept her most prized possessions, shiny buttons, a smooth river stone, and a few crumpled bills her grandmother had given her for good luck. She counted every coin, every dollar bill, a nickel here, a dime there, a faded $1 bill, then another. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she had it. Exactly $20. 2 crisp $10 bills, slightly worn from being folded and refolded. It wasn't much, she knew, not compared to 50,000, but it was everything she had. Clutching the money tightly in her small hand, Sophia embarked on her journey. The streets of New York City in 1958 were a bustling, intimidating labyrinth for an 8-year-old. Yellow cabs whizzed past, their drivers shouting out windows. Storefronts displayed everything from elegant dresses to fresh produce, their windows reflecting the hurried pace of pedestrians. The air was filled with the cacophony of city life. Distant sirens, the clatter of horse-drawn carts delivering goods, the chatter of people from every walk of life. She walked past newsstands displaying headlines about the Cold War, past men in suits reading newspapers, past women pushing prams. Every corner turned was a new adventure, a new challenge. She felt small, insignificant, but her determination was a burning ember in her chest. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button. It helps me bring more stories like this to you. Finally, after what felt like an endless trek, she stood before the imposing building Tony had described, its stone facade rising majestically against the darkening sky. This was it. Sophia stood before the imposing oak doors of Dominic Rossi's office building, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Taking a deep breath, she pushed one of the heavy doors open, revealing a grand lobby with polished marble floors and a stern-looking man behind a large desk. "I need to see Mr. Rossi," she announced, her voice surprisingly steady despite her trembling knees. The man, a burly enforcer named Vinny, looked down at her, utterly bewildered. "Kid, this ain't no place for you. Go home." But Sophia, with the unwavering resolve of a child on a mission, simply repeated, "I need to see Mr. Rossi." "It's important." Vinny, accustomed to dealing with hardened criminals, found himself disarmed by her sheer innocence and persistence. He made a call, a brief, hushed conversation, and then, to his own surprise, pointed her towards an elevator. "Third floor. His secretary will see you." The elevator ride felt like an ascent into another world. When the doors opened, she found herself in a plush waiting area, where a stylishly dressed secretary looked up from her typewriter, equally perplexed. "Mr. Rossi is very busy," the secretary began, but Sophia, without hesitation, walked past her, straight towards the imposing double doors of Dominic's private office. Before the secretary could react, Sophia pushed the doors open and stepped inside. Dominic Rossi sat behind a massive mahogany desk, the room exuding an aura of power and wealth. Dark wood paneling adorned the walls, interspersed with framed oil paintings depicting serene Italian landscapes. A crystal decanter filled with amber whiskey sat on a polished tray, alongside a matching crystal cigar box. The air was thick with the lingering scent of expensive tobacco. Dominic, mid-conversation on a black rotary phone, paused, his eyes widening slightly as he saw the small figure standing in his doorway. He slowly lowered the receiver, his gaze fixed on Sophia. His men, who had been standing guard, looked at each other in confusion, unsure how this child had breached their security. Sophia walked directly to his desk, her small hand still clutching the two $10 bills. She placed them carefully on the polished wood surface, pushing them towards him. "Please," she began, her voice a soft plea. "Please don't hurt my father. He's all I have." Her big brown eyes filled with a desperate earnestness, locked onto his. Dominic stared at the money, then at her, his expression unreadable. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of city traffic. He picked up one of the $10 bills, turning it over in his fingers, his spiderweb tattoo seeming to crawl across the paper. He looked back at Sophia, searching her eyes, seeing not just a child, but a reflection of a profound, universal love. The tension was unbearable, a delicate balance between the hardened criminal and the innocent plea. And then, slowly, silently, a single tear traced a path down Dominic Rossi's cheek, followed by another and another. The feared Mafia boss, the man of stone, began to cry. The tears that streamed down Dominic Rossi's face were not just for the little girl standing before him. They were tears that had been held captive for 15 long years, tears for a past he could never reclaim. As Sophia's innocent plea echoed in his opulent office, a floodgate of memories burst open, transporting him back to a time when his world was different, when his heart wasn't yet encased in stone. He saw another little girl, with the same big, trusting brown eyes, the same pure innocence. Her name was also Sophia, his Sophia. She would have been 8 years old now, just like the girl before him. But his Sophia had been taken from him, cruelly and prematurely, 15 years ago. He remembered her infectious giggle, the way her small hand fit perfectly in his, her boundless energy as she chased pigeons in the park. He remembered her favorite doll, her drawings taped haphazardly to the refrigerator, her innocent questions about the world. His Sophia had died of pneumonia, a swift and merciless illness that had swept through the tenements of the Lower East Side. But the true tragedy, the one that had haunted his every waking moment and tormented his dreams, was that he hadn't been there. He had been locked away, serving time for a misunderstanding that had escalated into a brutal street fight. He had been in prison, powerless, when his little girl had taken her last breath. He never got to say goodbye. He never got to hold her one last time. He never got to tell her how much he loved her. The guilt, the raw, agonizing grief had festered within him, hardening his heart, turning him into the ruthless man he was today. He had built an empire of fear and power, a fortress around his soul, to ensure he would never again feel so vulnerable, so helpless. But now, Looking into the eyes of Sofia Benedetti, he saw his own lost daughter. He saw the innocence he had failed to protect, the love he had been denied. Her small, outstretched hand, offering her meager $20, was not just a plea for her father's life. It was a desperate, innocent offering that pierced through the layers of his hardened exterior, reaching the raw, wounded core of his being. The image of his own Sophia, vibrant and full of life, then frail and fading, flashed before his eyes. The pain was excruciating, a fresh wound reopened, but this time it was accompanied by a strange, unfamiliar sensation, a glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption. Dominic Rossi slowly wiped the tears from his eyes, his gaze still fixed on Sophia. The transformation was subtle but profound. The cold, calculating glint in his eyes was replaced by a warmth, a vulnerability that his men had never witnessed. He reached across the desk, gently pushing the two $10 bills back towards Sophia. "Keep your money, little one," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. He then opened a drawer in his desk, pulling out a thick wad of bills. He peeled off several, counting them quickly. "This," he said, placing 5 crisp $100 bills on top of her 20, "is for you, for your bravery." Sophia's eyes widened, not just at the sight of the money, but at the unexpected kindness in his voice. Dominic then turned to his men, his voice regaining some of its usual authority, but now infused with a new, undeniable conviction. "The debt is paid," he announced, his gaze sweeping over them, daring any to question his decision. "No one touches Marco Benedetti or his daughter. Understand?" His men, still reeling from the sight of their boss in tears, nodded silently, their faces a mixture of surprise and grudging respect. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something that defied the brutal code they lived by. Dominic then looked back at Sophia, a soft smile gracing his lips, a smile that few had ever seen. "You saved your father's life today," he told her, his voice gentle. "But more importantly, you saved my soul." He rose from his chair, walking around the desk to stand before her. He knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level, and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. His touch was surprisingly tender, devoid of any menace. "From this day forward," he promised, his eyes holding hers, "the Benedetti family is under my protection. No one will ever harm them." Sophia, still a little overwhelmed, simply nodded, a small, hopeful smile beginning to form on her face. She knew instinctively that her father was safe. She had faced the most feared man in the Lower East Side, and she had won. As she walked out of Dominic Rossi's office, clutching the money, she felt a lightness in her step, a profound sense of relief. The heavy burden that had weighed on her small shoulders was gone, replaced by the quiet triumph of a child who had dared to challenge the darkness and found a flicker of light. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. I post new Mafia stories 3 times a week. The events of that cold November day in 1958 echoed through the lives of everyone involved, a testament to the unexpected power of innocence and the enduring possibility of redemption. Marco Benedetti, initially bewildered by Dominic Rossi's sudden change of heart, soon understood the gravity of what his daughter had done. With the burden of debt lifted and the unspoken protection of the city's most powerful figure, Ristorante Benedetti not only survived but thrived. Marco reinvigorated, expanded his business, opening 2 more successful Italian restaurants in the years that followed, always remembering the day his little Sofia saved everything. Sofia Benedetti grew up, a bright and compassionate young woman. She never forgot the day she faced Dominic Rossi, nor the profound impact it had on her life and her family's. The memory served as a constant reminder of the courage she possessed and the unexpected kindness that could emerge from the most unlikely places. She carried that lesson with her, shaping her into a woman who always sought to help those in need, a quiet force for good in her community. And Dominic Rossi? That day marked a turning point in his life. The tears he shed for his lost daughter, triggered by Sofia Benedetti's innocent plea, cracked open the hardened shell around his heart. While he remained a formidable figure in the underworld, his actions began to shift. He started, subtly at first, to use his influence for good. anonymous donations to orphanages, quiet support for struggling families in the Lower East Side, and a newfound, almost paternal watchfulness over the Benedetti family became part of his routine. He never spoke of his lost daughter, nor of the day Sophia came to his office, but the change in him was undeniable. The feared Mafia boss, the man of stone, was now a man touched by grace, forever altered by the courage of an 8-year-old girl and her $20. His legacy, once defined by fear, now carried a whisper of something more profound, a hidden compassion, a quiet redemption. What did you think of Dominic's choice? Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories from the golden age of organized crime, check out the video I'm recommending next. I'll see you there.